Call to order the special council meeting of the corporation of the township of Brunel and Dalton Raglan this 6th day of March 2023 at 5:32 p.m. Roll call, Councillor Banks.
Here.
Councillor Cockle. Here. Councillor Cullen.
Here.
Councillor Watt.
Present.
We have a quorum. As we gather this evening, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of this council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest with anything that's on the agenda this evening?
Not by me.
No.
No.
We have a resolution that the council of the corporation of the township of Brunel, Lindop and Raglan adopt the agenda as submitted. Could I get a mover support, please? Councillor Banks, seconded by Councillor Quad. Any questions? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Against? Motion carried. So the purpose of this meeting is to receive a presentation from Bruce Howard, Planning 101, and also to pass a bylaw and to do discussion on the draft budget. So we will turn it over to Bruce to give us a lesson in Planning 101.
Oh, thank you very much for having me today. And I've forgotten how many times I've sort of given this presentation, and it has changed almost every single time. So there's been changes fast and furious under the Planning Act. The province has initiated. We're doing our best to stay current with them. But so please don't feel overwhelmed because, well, you'll probably feel a little bit overwhelmed because we feel overwhelmed as well. It's just been so many changes. But thank you very much for having me. And I found that it works best to sort of, if you have any questions, feel free to just put up your hand and interrupt me as opposed to waiting to the end. Something that works better. So feel free to interrupt and ask as many questions as you feel necessary. So we have a great team at the County of Brantford. Our department consists of Jason Davis, who is the Director of Development and Property. I'm Bruce Howarth, the Manager for the Planning Services. And then our planning team consists of Anne McBean. She's a county planner with us. We have Lindsay Bennett Farquhar, who's a county planner. Alana Zato is probably a name that you'll see quite often on correspondence of our department. She's our secretary treasurer / junior planner, and she deals almost exclusively with consent application or severance application. So you'll see her name, a lot on correspondence. We have Rajat Ali. He's a fairly new to our team. He's a junior planner. We have Angie Schultz. She is the GIS coordinator. GIS plays a significant role in what we do, and there's going to be some slides further on, but GIS essentially boils down to maps. It's our mapping software and also data management, managing that data that goes into that and produces a variety of tools that we use it for, and there's some slides later on that. And we currently have 2 vacant positions. We have a county planner position that's vacant, and we also have a GIS technician position that's vacant. And we have Donna, who provides administration support to us. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. Just a very quick definition of what planning is. There's a whole bunch of if you were to Google it, there's piles of different definitions. Everybody has their own idea of what planning is, but essentially it comes boils down to how land is used in our community. So the goal that we have is to create communities that are thriving, they're equitable, they're efficient, attractive, and we're looking at both for the current people who are living here now, but we also have a mind into the future for future generations that are not going to come after us. And one of the keywords I like to talk about here is efficient. So when we're talking about efficiency, the biggest part of this is talking about financial efficiency. So how we plan our communities, how we use land has a huge impact on how municipalities, the economic impact on municipalities, whether it's we're using services, whether it's through road. You guys don't have any water or sewer infrastructure in your township, but if you did, that's a significant component of that. You do have stormwater considerations and drains, how that works. But then also, and the next slides are going to get into it, but you as the local council, you've been given responsibilities to make decisions under the Planning Act, not just for your municipal interests, so how it affects your government, but also how it impacts other agencies. So you can think of health boards, how our hospital systems, County of Renfrew with our ambulance services and health services and all those services, school boards planning, all those public agencies like or utilities, so there's Hydro One or Bell or Enbridge. So all these people have interests, and the decisions that you make have an impact on how efficient and how they can run their services. So it's important to keep that in mind. That's not just the local interests that you're making decisions on, but your decisions can have a cascading effect and have implications for other services. So anyways, that's essentially, that's the goal. We want to have good places to live, work and play in, and so essentially the goal. We'll leave it at that. So hierarchy of planning services. If you ever seen a slideshow put on by the planning division over the last 15 years or so, you'll probably have seen the slide. And it's meant to represent the hierarchy of planning documents in Ontario and how it works. So you'll see at the top, the illustration has a big, the triangle is wide at the top and it narrows down to a point. So it's wide at the top to indicate that at the top, all encompassing, the province gets to pass, or the province passes the laws and which is called the Planning Act that regulates and it says exactly how planning in Ontario takes place. This is the act that gives municipalities the jurisdiction to even make decisions on land use planning matters. So under the Planning Act, it says, your municipality, you get to make the decisions on X, Y, and Z, and then this is how you're required to process those applications, and here's who has to get noticed, and here are the timelines that involve with that. And so that's the provincial legislation that encompasses all those details. Under that, we have the provincial policy statement. So this is the policy document that the province has. And so we have various interests on lands. I'm going to get to what those interests are in a future slide. It says, essentially, it talks about here are the interests of how land is used. And this is how we want to make sure municipalities, when you're making a decision, all your decisions have to be consistent with our policy statement. So that's and that policy, that set of policies applies across Ontario. So whether you're right in the heart of Toronto, or you're up in the hills of Windhoek, the same policy document applies to you. Below that, so as the triangle starts to get a little narrower and a little bit more specific, we get to the official plan. So these are your local policies that would dictate how land can be used within your community. So it gets more detailed, some more specific area policies. Gets into the exact designations on your land. So the provincial policy statement would be very much broader. It will say, for example, protect prime agricultural lands. But it's a broad statement of how do you protect agricultural lands. Then when it comes down to the provincial or your official plan, that's when you start mapping them and saying, hey, here are our land or agricultural lands that we're supposed to protect. Then this is how we're going to do it to make sure that we are consistent with that provincial policy statement. So below that, so you're at the very point is that the point. And that's where you get down to the property specific rules that impact property. That's the zoning bylaw. So zoning bylaw is your council adopted bylaw that says exactly how buildings and land can be used. And we'll get into a little more detail again later. There will be some slides on it, but this is your local implementation. So if somebody is not using their property in accordance with the zoning bylaw, that's when you would get your bylaw enforcement out there to enforce your zoning bylaw. You would not enforce, like the official plan is not a bylaw that is a document that you would enforce using bylaw. So if somebody wasn't using their property in accordance with the official plan, technically that's fine. It's not a enforceable bylaw. It's not a bylaw that says this you shall do this. That official plan is just a set of policies that get eventually implemented through the zoning bylaw. So you can see it has a trickle down effect. So when the province makes a change to the Planning Act, then they were provincial policy, it sort of trickles down into official planning policies, which trickle down into zoning bylaws, which eventually trickle down to the property owner saying this is what we can do with their property. So authority, so a little bit more details on these documents. So the first one, Planning Act. So this provides all municipalities with jurisdiction to make decisions on land use matters. And we can make plus slides for you to later on exactly whose jurisdiction these different applications and different tools are. I'm sorry for the planning jargon. Tools is like what the planning world would call various applications, or such as a site plan application or zoning bylaw. or other bylaws that you have, so or development agreements and site plans, we call these tools. These are the things that municipalities can use to efficiently or effectively say how land can be used within your area. So planning Act sets the ground rules for land use planning. It says how to integrate matters of provincial interest, which is going to be the next slide. We'll show you what those are. It says exactly how land uses can be controlled and who can control them. It encourages cooperation among the various interests, and it recognizes local councils as a decision maker. You'll see changes, there's more later, so there have been a significant amount of changes. And even on that last point, so in the Planning Act, it actually says, they recognize council's ability and authority and accountability in municipal planning. But the last two bills have actually had significant impacts on the role of council in the planning process. And it's actually reducing council's involvement and putting a greater onus on staff for zoning bylaws and site plans in particular. So we'll get into some of those changes and how they affect you. But the act is in there. The act is written to provide the municipality with that responsibility for making land use decisions. So, talked about provincial interests. We talked a little bit about some of those other interests that are on the land. So the municipality, you as council get to make the decisions on how land can be used, what the rules are for these, but you have to, again, take into consideration provincial interests and other agencies like we talked about. So provincial interests are taken so much. So on that provincial policy statement, they have policies on protecting ecological systems or natural heritage, protective agricultural resources, conservation and management of resources. And so a lot of the common resources are, especially in this area, are mineral aggregates, so sand, gravel, gravel, and mining resources. It could be, we do have some mining resources in the township as well. Archaeology potential or archaeology sites. Infrastructure like energy and water, communication, transportation, sewage, water, waste. So we're looking at development of safe and healthy communities. So how we plan and use those land can have an impact on the safety of our communities. Education, health, social and recreational facilities, housing opportunities, including affordable housing, for the financial well-being of the municipality and other agencies. It talks about coordination, how do we coordinate among these various interests, and overall just the appropriate location of growth and development. So those are all matters of provincial interest, and we have that provincial policy statement, which will be the next slide. Essentially says, council, when you're making a decision, you have to have regard for all of these interests, and you have to be consistent with our provincial policy statement. So call it provincial policy statement is probably about 30 pages. It's only about that thick. It's not a huge, it's not a very large document in context, but it has significant impacts on what a municipality can make decisions on and how they make those decisions. So it's that policy document again that provides direction on land use matters specifically related to those provincial interests. And they'll have some great big sweeping policies like I think it's the example, you shall protect prime agricultural lands. So that's like a one paragraph, and then that ends up being 10 pages of official plan policy later on saying specifically how are we going to be protecting that resource, or how are we going to protect mining resources or forestry, or how are we going to protect our wetlands. So they'll have like those broad policies, and then they become more detailed through your local official plan policies or into your zoning bylaws. So all decisions that relate to plan matters, it's right in the Planning Act, is written, you have to make decisions that are consistent with the provincial policy statement. And PPS has a bunch of headings which start with building strong communities, and this talks about having efficient development patterns or land use patterns, having wise use of and management of our resources. This is both whether it's the environment, agricultural, mineral aggregate, or cultural heritage. And cultural heritage just into again archaeology or history or past use of land. And then protecting public health and safety. So this can be anywhere from natural hazards, it could be floodplain, wildland, fire risks, could be unstable slopes or slope stability issues, or it could be a human-made hazard. So it could be an abandoned mine site, or it could be a waste disposal site, or lands that have been contaminated from a previous use. So It's protecting public health and safety from land uses that could impact either both current residents or future residents. And again, more later, it's changes, I kept all the more, I kept on putting more later and dot, 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 I found it was easier to, at the end, go through all the changes as opposed to trying to integrate them into each of the slides. So there are changes coming to this as well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. So official plan, again, we already talked about it a little bit. So this is the policy document. It's a council adopted vision of how land can be used. So in Renfrew County, we have a little bit of a unique situation. So we have 17 local municipalities in the county. The vast majority of them are rural areas. And it used to be that every municipality had its own official plan. And especially with some of the changes to the provincial policy and under the Planning Act, where all the policies have to be consistent with the PPS and meeting a specific criteria. It was, a lot of the, say, local context was limited to your options of what you could do. So what we were finding is we were having 17 official plans in the county of Renfrew, and the vast majority of them were exactly the same. And it was costing municipalities tens of thousands of dollars to write these plans and update them and keep them and to check. And when we were at the end of the day looking pretty much the exact same policies. So back in 2003, the decision was made and supported by the local councils to adopt a county Renfrew official plan. So instead of having one official plan that was for 12 of the municipalities. So we have 12 really, so it's like more rural-based municipalities, and we have 5 that are more urban. So for example, Town of Arn Prior, Town of Petawawa, Town of Renfrew, they have Town of Heber, but they have their own official plans. And then the rural areas of the county have all adopted into the county official plan policy. So what that has allowed us to do was not only save a lot of money and time and process by having to have 12 different official plans that we're maintaining and the cost involved with that, but it also provides a level of consistency across those municipal boundaries, so that a developer in Brunel, Lenduck, and Redmond is dealing with the same set of land development policies in Madawaska Valley or Greater Madawaska or your neighbors. So I think the same rules that are applying to BLRs are same ones that are being applied across municipal boundaries. So developers are familiar with them, they know how they work, so that we find it helps us quite a bit and helps them as well when everybody is aware and using the same set of policies and guidelines. So the official plan, it has those specific policies on how land can be used. And again, it's consistent with the PBS. It's prepared with input from the community and public agencies to ensure that future development meets the needs of our community. I'm sure Councillor Sheldon was very familiar and can remember the meetings that we held for the county official plan when that was going. So we held a series of, well, I think it was 10 of them, 10 public meetings that we held at various locations throughout the county. And it was a long process. There was a lot of community input that we received. And so I think the process, the thing took us about 7 years from start to finish by the time we got it done.
Because your provincial, your official plan is supposed to be updated every so many years, right?
Yes.
I don't know if there's a set date for that, or.
It all depends. So we're supposed to keep our official plan updated every time the province updates the provincial policy statement. So every time we have 3 years, so that whole trickle down effect. So the province updates the provincial plan. We have 3 years to implement those changes into an official plan. And then after those changes are made, we're going to talk to this a little more later in the debate. You have 3 years after that to update your zoning bylaws. So that's how it all gets trickled down. And so we're now in that time frame that we updated the official plan within the last 3 years. The township is now within that time frame of needing to update its zoning bylaw or the Planning Act.
Do you have a schedule for us for that?
Yes, a loose schedule. Yes, we have, because we're trying to update 12 of them at a time, so we try to get a schedule and keeping in order for getting municipalities and queue to update it. So yes, you are on the list of ones to be done. We haven't started yet, but hopefully in 2023, early 2024, not only depending on how many staffing that we're able to, vacancies we're able to fill, you guys are on that schedule to move forward. So under the last council was provided a work program work plan for that project. And what that would look like. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that, especially when I have a slide on this one, but we can definitely talk about that project and how that impacts the township.
Okay, because our zoning bylaws are pre-amalgamation, that's how old they are.
They are overdue.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so these policies, they so in the broader sense, council's tools, again, I use that tools from the plan jargon that are available to council, whether it's, again, using your zoning bylaw or site plan control or development agreements, it says how land can be used. And again, your official plan policies, are consistent with the PPS as it is now. And the other thing I will note, I guess, in this is when we update the PPS, or sorry, when we update the official plan, it has to be consistent with the PPS, and if it's not consistent with the PPS, these official plans aren't actually approved by county council. So county council adopts a plan, and then that plan is sent to the province, and then the province is the actual approval authority for that document. And so what happened at their last official plan, county council was trying to ensure as much, say, flexibility into these policies as possible, and trying to find that balance of meeting provincial policy and finding a flexible approach to how land is used in Renfrew County. So a plan was adopted, it was sent to the province, and it came back, say, significantly altered. It was, you know, for a bunch of things, whether it was requirements for studies, requirements for separation distances. So there was a bunch of, I'll say, a lot of that flexibility that had been integrated in the plan was taken out at the provincial level. They gave it back to us saying, thanks for your effort on adopting the plan, but here you go, here's your official plan policies. After we received that, county council did, I'm not sure how there's a little bit of a pushback.
There was, I would say quite a bit of
Quite a bit
pushback from county
of pushback. There were
council.
meetings
And
with, between
Yeah.
the county council and the minister.
Yeah.
And as we came back with a second follow-up sort of amendment where the province did allow us to keep some of that local flexibility, but not everything. So it was sort of like a give and take.
yeah,
Some of the topics that I think we narrowed down the issue to about 7 big ticket items where we really like, so.
what we didn't agree with, and
Yeah, we didn't agree with.
we didn't think it was Renfrew County friendly, and,
Yeah.
like you say, I guess in a long story short, because this happened over a period of time, when it finally did come back, we were given some flexibility on the issues that we wanted, which was important.
Yeah, on some of them,
On some,
yes, I would say it was say,
yeah, it wasn't a total, go ahead and do what you want, but it was better than
it
what
was
it
better
could have
than,
been.
yes, for sure. So, yeah, so that's the official plan. So the goal of the official plan, you know, talk about providing some of that flexibility where we're allowed under the provincial policy statement. So the goal is to maintain and enhance the quality of the natural built environment and recognize the human environment and our assets in the county. We'll go again, strengthening the county's economic base, and making sure that we have the capacity for servicing in the future, whether it's our roads, our waste management facilities, or any of our municipal services, whether it's water, sewer, stormwater, all those things. And we want development to occur in a way that is sustainable for a natural system, whether it's our, you know, obviously lakes and rivers are incredibly important to BLR in our rural areas. It's a big part of where a lot of our development and growth is, and people come here because the water is clean and we have the safe natural environments or good mountain environments. And so we want to make sure that if we are improving development, that's something that continues. So how can we develop on our lakes and our water systems and our areas, but still keep that asset that makes people want to be here, again, so we want to promote cost-effective development to sustain the financial well-being of the municipalities and the other agencies that rely on that, and at the end of the day, facilitate compatibility between different land uses, so that if we are approving different land uses, that they're not going to have negative impacts on other lists, whether it's a new pit or quarry adjacent to a house, we can make sure that that separation distance is big enough, and if it's getting closer, there are things that we can do to make sure that operator of that pit is not going to have any impacts on its neighbors. That's just one example of what an excerpt from what the official plan looks like. So it breaks down an area into different land uses. Your projector is better than Kilo Henry Richards. So there you can actually see it on the last presentation I did. So the green is something like is what's considered to be environmentally protected areas. We have the white areas that are considered rural, so that's your general rural areas which permit a variety of uses and provide, that's probably the biggest area that county council really worked on getting flexibility worked into the plan. So it allows a variety of uses, whether it's residential or commercial or industrial or something that could be. So anyway, that provides the greatest flexibility into what people can use their land for in that rural area. In gray at the top left-hand side is mineral aggregate, so that's an area where the province has identified a resource of sand or gravel, or it could be bedrock as well, like for example, limestone resource, it's saying that here's an area that could be used for future extractions, so we want to make sure that residential or non-compatible uses are not in those areas, so that in the future, the resource is there and it could be extracted without any land use compatibility issues. So that's just what the map looks like. So the zoning bylaw. So again, this is one of those tools that the municipality has, and it's at the very bottom of that point, going back to that hierarchy of planning documents. And this is where the policies hit the land and how it actually impacts what somebody can do on the property, how what the actual uses that's permitted, and then any village structures where they permitted on the land. So what are the setbacks from the road? What are the setbacks from neighboring property lines? What are the setbacks from environmentally sensitive areas, whether it's the water or a wetland, or could be a setback to a waste disposal site, for example, or from a mineral aggregate resource. So the zoning bylaw will put set in policies into actual language that is an enforceable document that says this is exactly how land can be used. And then if somebody is not following the zoning bylaw or building something that doesn't need it, that's when enforcement would come in. So similar to the official plan map schedule, your zoning bylaw has a map schedule that should divide the township into different zones and into different categories. And each of those zones or categories would have its own specific list of provisions that the property owner would have to follow. So common ones will be your rural residential, just plain rural community facility. I think there's one up there that could be a rink, or it could be a cemetery, or just any other type of community use. It could be also a GC, there's a GC right around there. So for general commercial use, or it could be an industrial use. I'll see industrial use as a map. And then the gray that shows an area that would be set aside for environmental protection reasons. So most likely, just looking at that map, I'm guessing it's a wetland that's associated with some of those creeks that are coming in the property. So different types of planning applications. So in brackets, you'll see it says bracket F section. It'll be referring to a section, and that's the section in the Planning Act. So that is under the Planning Act. It says specifically who has jurisdiction to make decisions on what type of applications. So some applications, just said County of Renfrew, you make the decisions on them. And for other applications, the province said Township of Brunel, Lindau, Reichman, these are within your jurisdiction, you make the decisions on these types of applications. So for under county approvals, we have county official plan amendments and local official plan amendments. So I mentioned local official plan amendment previously. So for example, the town of Arnprior, they have their own local official plan. But just like county official plans, how we adopt them and then they go up to the province for approval, is similar for the town of Arnprior. So the town of Arnprior adopts it, but then the approval of that actually comes up to the county of Renfrew. We have plans of subdivision, so if somebody wants to do a significant amount of residential lots and they want to do a plan subdivision, that's will be approved by the county of Renfrew. Per lot control, that's another tool under the subdivision control when we're dealing with plans of subdivision. And then consent applications, which are very common. It's probably the most common way of development in Brunel, and Reichland. So this is a consent can include a severance for a new lot. It could include an application for a lot addition. So just transferring the property from one property owner to an abutting property owner, or it could be a right of way or an easement. So those are all different types of consent applications that are approved at the county level. So for your local official plans, the first one doesn't apply to you because you don't have a local official plan, you rely on the county official plan, so that one doesn't really apply to you. But, so under, for councils, within your responsibilities for approvals, you have zoning bylaw amendments, so you have to adopt a zoning bylaw, and then if anybody wants to make a change to that zoning bylaw, that application would come to council. The minor variances, so minor variances is very similar to a zoning bylaw, but it's just, as the name says, it's not as significant, it doesn't include as much review. So typically, for example, if you wanted to change a land use, so if your property is zoned residential and you wanted to introduce a commercial use, that would be a zoning bylaw amendment application. So you're actually you're applying to the council to change that actual zone, or the actual uses that are permitted to be on that property. The minor variance would be more like, the zoning bylaw says you have to have your side yard setback from your neighbor is 3 meters. And for whatever reason, you want to change that setback from 3 meters down to 2 meters. So instead of going through as an extensive process, there are usually not a lot of these studies that are required for it, but you're asking for a deviation from the buy-off or for a reason or not, the minor, so in that case, there's we'll say a quicker, less onerous test that that person or that landowner would have to go through. It still has to come to your local township for approval. Your committee of adjustment typically is would get that minor variance considered. And then lastly is site plan. And this is one that has undergone significant changes over the last two or 3 months that we're still getting some of the implications of what that means. But typically site plan is applied to more significant development. So whether anything that's commercial, anything that's industrial, are automatically triggered to site plan approval. And typically, prior to the changes of the Planning Act, anything more than 4 residential units would have triggered site plan approval, but the province has just changed the criteria for that. And so they've upped it to 10. So anything now, you have to have a minimum of 10 units on a lot before the site plan control will kick in. And there's other changes to site plan approval, again, we'll go through it at the end of the presentation.
So 10 subdivisions or 10 new lots or 10 developed lots?
Not lots, so a 10 unit building.
Oh, it's 10 units.
Yeah, so you have 1 lot and you want to build 10 units on that 1 lot, then if you were less than 10, site plan does not apply to you. But if you were greater than 10, then site plan control would apply. So that's new as of January. So before that trigger, that level would have been 4. So if you're proposing like 4 blocks or something like that,
Yeah.
then site plan would apply. Any other questions on that one before I move forward? Okay. So another one that's gonna have a lot of changes. So this is one of the services that county offers. So we have a general inquiry process, and it also goes under the name of pre-consultation. And this is going under a lot of review currently, which we'll get into at the end of the slide, or at the end of the deck. So pre-consultation, you'll see in brackets that is not yet mandatory. So right now, and the next slide deals with complete application. So we offer a service where any person who wants to develop or use their land before they submit any type of application, we encourage them to come in and talk to us first. And what we do is look at their proposal, whether it's a consent application or zoning amendment or whatever that they want to do with their land. We'll take a look at it. We'll review the proposal against the PPS, the provincial policy statement. We'll take a look at it against the official plan and give them recommendations or at least a heads up of what are the issues that they would have to address or deal with if they were to submit that application. So we would take a look at it and say, either you're fine, you're good to go, don't worry about it, you feel confident in your application, or we may say, well, you're actually right in the heart of a mineral aggregate resource, you're gonna be into a hard time, or you're gonna have to do a hydrogeological study looking at the water for quantity of well water. So we can highlight any concerns that there are, or highlight any, I don't want to say concerns, but any issues that they would have to address to make sure that their application can be successful. So right now, this process is free. County, this was a proposal to charge a fee for it, and county council preferred to keep this, service free for the time being, so any person can come to the county and we'll do a general inquiry for them, there's no cost to them, we'll give them that list. And we, essentially, what we do is we provide a commenting package and list all the planning requirements that they would have to deal with, or it could be an agency that they might have to deal with. So for example, it's adjacent to a provincial highway. So we provide them with the name and the contact saying, before you apply for this, go talk to MTO. And here's the contact information of MTO to make sure that MTO is willing to give you an entrance permit. Because if MTO says, no, we're not going to give you an entrance, then your proposal is not going to be successful. And why waste all your money and time and effort if you're for something for an application and that's also not going to be as successful. So we provide and try to give them that list to let them have a good understanding or good knowledge of what they are going to be in for if they submitted that application. And this is extra important. So the next one, and this is all going to be changes, while you'll see this one talks about Bill 109 and OPA 35 later, where a complete application is. So I think to submit an application, we want to make sure it's what we call a complete application, so that council, you have the information that's necessary for you to make an informed decision. So during that pre-consultation, that general inquiry process, we highlight all the necessary requirements for any supporting studies that are necessary to show that the proposal will be compliant with either PPS or official plan policies. And then ultimately, it's going to be up to council to make a decision, for example, on a zoning bylaw amendment as to whether those tests have been met. And the Planning Act says applications that aren't complete, so if somebody submits an application for like a zoning bylaw amendment to the township, it didn't include the required information. The township doesn't accept that. You are not to, as staff, we don't accept it. We say your application is incomplete. We highlight any areas that are incomplete and send it back. And this is key because then under the Planning Act, you're on the clock for how long you have to process the applications. So if you actually accept an application and you later on find out that it was incomplete or you're missing information or something occurs that you find out you need more information, you're on the clock, and that has repercussions later on, which we'll talk. There'll be some slides highlighting the concerns with that. But the goal is essentially that when applications come in, they're complete, so that we can have an efficient processing time and get a report to council showing how that application meets the test and make a recommendation to council. Usually getting 99% of the time is to recommend approval of it, because hopefully we did out any of the bad applications. But anyway, it's a very important step of the application being complete. The general inquiry process really feeds that complete application, so that somebody we're submitting the application knows what their requirements are. And again, changes, we'll talk about that again. So the role of the planner, so what do we do? Essentially, the role of the planner is to provide council with the advice. You guys are the decision makers. So whether it's at Bruno Lindon Ragland for your responsibilities for minor variances or site plans or zoning bylaw amendments, you're the decision maker, or whether it's at the county level on plans of subdivision or consent applications, the role of the planner is the same, essentially provide advice and recommendations to council. So we'll take in an application, we make sure that it's complete. We will process it in accordance with the Planning Act, so making sure that the notices are sent out. So there's a public component of this, making sure that notices are sent to adjacent property owners, or put in the paper, or posted on the property, or sent to any agency, whether it's again, Hydro One, school boards, Bell, all these people who might have an interest in that application, MTO, other provincial ministries. So we circulate it, get comments back in, review those studies or the technical submissions with that application, put it all together in a package and bundle up into a nice little planning report and give that to council and say, here you go, based on our review of the application, here's a summary of whether it meets the tests or not of your PPS and the official plan, and whether we think it's a good idea in the long term to move forward with this application or not. So then it's there for council decision, and you can choose what you would. Yes.
Does that apply for zoning bylaw amendments?
Yes.
So when we get them, just forward them to you?
Yes. Yeah, and we'll get to the planning service agreement on another one, so which is say how you as a township use the county staff. So there's a slide on that as well. And hopefully you don't get there, but the very last one is expert witness at the Ontario Land Tribunal. That's never a fun situation, and there's changes to that one too, that we'll get to. But there's also on the Ontario Land Tribunal. Hopefully we never actually get there, but in the event that we do, we are qualified as being expert witnesses at these tribunals who would hear any appeal to the council decision. So the role of the province. So again, we already talked about planning act, they set the rules. Essentially, they say this is how planning is going to be done in Ontario, and municipalities, you have to do X, Y, Z. So they pass the planning act, they set the rules, they give everybody their role, their responsibilities and jurisdiction under the planning act. They write the TPS, say here's the provincial plans, here's provincial guidelines, this is how municipalities, you have to make decisions that meet X, Y, Z. There's a variety of separate provincial ministries that have interests in how land is used. We talked about Ministry of Transportation is a big one. So any application that we have that's within, I think it's 300 meters of a provincial highway jurisdiction, we have to send that application to MTO and consult with them to make sure that their interests are protected. Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks is one that we deal with all the time. And so they have stormwater management, it could be sewage disposal, it could be water usage, species at risk. There's a whole host of interests that MOE has. Contaminated lands is another one. There's a Ministry of Northern Development Mines. They are largely there for the resources that we talked about, whether it's, especially in our area, for mineral aggregate, your sand and gravel resources or those types of uses. And Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sports. So anytime there's an archaeology potential, essentially any, I'll say, significant development that's within 300 meters of a navigable waterway is looking at doing archaeology assessments, and those assessments go right to the Ministry of Tourism and Sport, Culture and Sport, and they review it, and if it meets their criteria, they're okay with it, then they give us a letter signing off saying we've reviewed the archaeology assessment and we give it our blessing to move forward to the next step. And ultimately, they are the provider of land use data. So I talked about Angie Schultz in our GIS department. So she plays a critical role at the county and for local municipalities, and so often an unseen role. So people don't really understand how much we rely on GIS and especially the data that we get. So the province, through all these various ministries, has just massive amounts of data on land, whether it's forestry cover or resources or we have hundreds of these different data sets of just information that we have. And then what Angie does is she takes that information. It's not just from provincial ministries either, it could be from Impact. So we're connected to Impact and other municipal data, and the county maintains their own data as well. Takes all this information and then disseminates it and puts it in a way that can be used for different purposes, whether it's for how we manage our roads, looking at where our culverts are, or how much the county's looking at using GIS potentially into our asset management plan, integrating those to have a better idea of what's going on. But we take all this data and then try to put it into a way that's useful for local decision makers. So when you're making a decision on any of your, whether it's a planning application or any other municipal assets, that you have a good idea of what's going on in your landscape. So what do we do at the county run groups? We talked about some of the applications that we have. We approve local official plan amendments. We approve county official plan amendments. We adopt county official plan amendments and then they get approved to the province for approval, except for site-specific ones. So when part of the, I want to say deal is the wrong word, but negotiation that we had with the province, so significant, or like for those 5-year comprehensive updates to the official plan, those still have to go up to the province for approval. But what the province did was once we finally got our official plan approved, they gave us exemption for site-specific approval so that those no longer have to go to the province. So previously, some like a property owner did want to get the official plan into the county for official plan, and first go through the county process. We would adopt it and it would go up to the province for provincial approval. The province had a fee of $15,000 to just look at the application. What they did was give us exemption. So all those site-specific approvals now no longer have to go to the province, so they stay at the county level, so the county council has the jurisdiction now to both adopt and approve sort of site-specific amendments to the official plan, but the big comprehensive ones, they still go up to the province for provincial approval. Again, we talked about subdivision and condominium, municipal plan review, so this is where that aspect you're talking about, where we get a whole bunch of data from a variety of sources, and our job mainly through Angie is to take that data and implement it in a way that's usable by both the county and our local municipalities. We do have a GIS website, and I'm sure your staff are familiar with it. And it's also available to the public, but the public has a restricted view. So the staff members have access to all this land use data that we have and connected to MPAC as well. But there's a limited data set that's available to the public as well. So a lot of these data sets do have confidential information that we're not allowed to share with the public, whether it's private or personal information purposes, or features that are on a landscape that the province doesn't want people to know where they are. For example, they might have information on where a species at risk is. It's not information they really want the public being aware of. So they show that to staff, so we can use it for our own internal purposes, but they won't share, they don't have the public to necessarily know exactly where, for example, a ginseng plant is, or, you know, where turtles are, for example. So that's just, so staff have access to that, but the public don't. And, yeah, so that's it. Right, so the role of the local municipality, the role is to accept applications and process planning applications for official plan, not, that doesn't play with DLR, but for zoning bylaw amendments, minor variances, and site plans. The township's responsible for providing notices to the public and to agencies, holding public meetings, and there's changes to that as well. Make decisions that are consistent with the PPS and follow approved policy, and taking into consideration the agency comments and public comments that you receive, and professional advice, whether it's advice from your planning department, whether it's advice from your public works, building, or emergency personnel, whether it's the fire chief or, for example, the emergency services at the county might have comments as well. So the role of local municipality, you also would review and comment on any county application. So an application for a plan of subdivision or consent that is received at the county, we circulate the local municipality as well to make sure that your interests are protected. So that we're creating a lot on one of your local roads, that any interest, that we want to make sure that you're satisfied that an entrance permit can be issued, and make sure that no stormwater issues or drainage concerns with the property, making sure that any setbacks or any local interests are protected. So whether it's recreational, engineering, legal, or anything that your interests are protected there. So BLR has a planning service agreement with the County of Brantford, and this is something that was fairly new. So the county planning department offers planning service to 10 or 11 local municipalities who provide planning support to, and these planning service agreements are fairly new. So before we had them, we were sort of just as needed service, or it was sort of very informal what we were doing for different municipalities. And different municipalities would need or ask for different services from other municipalities. I mean, it was getting complicated, and the level of service that municipalities were requesting was changing quickly, and it was difficult to maintain appropriate staffing levels, whether it's, you know, we don't want to be having too many staff to do the level of service, or we get too few. So we want to have that best estimate of what is the workload that we're expected to have, and then we would get the appropriate staff to make sure that we could meet that need that we're promising. So we ask that municipalities sign these agreements, which would give us that consistency, or give us that confidence to make sure that we have the appropriate staff in place to make sure we can provide that service. And it's really to provide support for, and you can see it in all caps, municipal planning applications. So this is not dealing with consent applications or subdivision applications. So those are still county of Brantford umbrella flood approval. So this is dealing with applications specifically to the municipality, so applications like zoning bylaws, site plans, or minor variances. The municipality is still a decision maker, so these planning service agreements do not abdicate the municipality from your responsibilities to make decisions for these files. So we're not giving that permission to County of Brentford to make those decisions on your behalf. You are still a decision maker. You are just asking staff, County of Brentford staff to help your municipality process these applications to make sure that we're following the processes, following the Plan Act, and you are ultimately getting that planning recommendation to you from the county staff. So that's essentially what we're doing here. Our service would include application review, prepare all those notices, we would prepare a draft bylaw, we would give council a planning report, and we would provide that recommendation to council. And ultimately, it's up to your council, your township to make a decision on that application. We also offer office hour support from municipalities who ask it. And if you had a particularly contentious issue, for example, you got a zoning law amendment and that drew a crowd of people, and the council had a number of questions, we would also come and attend your council meeting and be available to answer any questions that council or members of the public had at that application. So if you do find yourself in that situation, we're learn how to come out and provide that support. Was there any questions on that? I went over that fairly quickly, but. Okay. Ontario Land Tribunal, this is another area that has gone significant change over the last few months, we'll say. So when I first started, it was called the Ontario Municipal Board, and I think it had been the Ontario Municipal Board for about 105 years. And it's been going over 3 name changes over the last 3 years. So it was the Ontario Municipal Board, and became the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, and currently it's known as the Ontario Land Tribunal. And a whole bunch of changes that are significant have happened. So before, somebody would be able to submit an application, so use a zoning bylaw and an application again, someone wanted to change the permitted, what they can do with their property, the use of their property. And a lot of times municipalities were getting, I'll say, weak applications, or to save as much money as possible. And municipalities were getting poor quality submissions, and they were forced to sort of deal with them. And people would, if there was an appeal in the event that either got turned down or appealed by a landowner, they would enhance their record or then beef up their submission to the Ontario Land Tribunal if they were forced to do it. What changed? So a couple of changes. So we talked about pre-consultation and the requirement for the complete application. That was really the emphasis. That was what the situation that was occurring that made those changes to the importance of making sure that we had complete applications up front. So what the Plan Act has done now, changed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, they've abolished de novo hearings. So de novo, like new. So before you submit somebody appeals, you go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the Ontario Land Tribunal would have heard the case right from scratch, as if nothing was decided, or it was a brand new application. What they've done now is then we will only consider applications as if to what local council had when they were making their decision. So if you had a poor quality submission that somebody gave a council a low quality submission, that low quality submission is the only thing that they could rely on at the Ontario Land Tribunal. So the Ontario Land Tribunal said it's unfair it's an abuse of the process essentially for you to come in and try to enhance your record at a later stage. So whatever was considered at the time when council made their decision, whether it's to support it or to not support it, that same information would be what could be used at the tribunal hearing. And there's also with that, they said there's a greater deference to municipal council decision. So now council decision actually has weight at the Ontario Land Tribunal. So they'll consider what information the council have when they make their decision, and they'll actually take that into account. So if it's, for example, 50-50 or whatever, I don't even know how to best it, but they like to know what the council decision was, and they take that into consideration and put a weight on council decision when they're deciding. So they're not just going to willy-nilly overturn a council decision. So your decision does carry a lot of significance, even in appeal applications. So what this does, it requires a lot more detail now upfront. It requires more peer review of certain studies. And it says more later, but I think I'm gonna get into it right now for this one. So the biggest change, I mean, it's gonna be on a future slide, we'll just get that later on. One of the biggest changes to the Ontario Land Tribunal is they are now awarding costs to the losing side. So before, if you found yourself at the Ontario Land Tribunal, it was not like a court case. So if you go to court, or Superior Court or Supreme Court in Ontario, anything like that, and it's typical that the losing side has to pay the winning side's court costs. Historically, at the OMB or the Ontario Land Tribunal, that was not the case. It was, as long as you weren't being vexatious, as long as everybody was behaving themselves in an appropriate manner, the court would, the tribunal would very rarely ever consider giving costs. So the change is, now it's a very rarely given costs. Now it's going to be, costs are going to be awarded to the losing side, which puts even a greater emphasis on your local decision to make sure that you're making the right decision. So then as staff, we need to make sure that if we're going to be making a recommendation to council, that the township is ultimately going to be responsible for not only for your costs in the case of an appeal, but also the costs of the side saying your decision was overturned at the Ontario Land Tribunal, then now you'd also be responsible for the cost of that winning side for both cases. That's a significant responsibility. So we take that seriously and want to make sure that we have when we bring you a recommendation, that it's going to be one that is defensible and one that I don't think it's going to put the township into a bad situation in the event of an event of appeal. So appeals don't happen often, but we do treat every application as if that's a possibility. So when somebody submits an application to us right from the start, we make sure that there's the proper records being followed and that we can demonstrate in the event of that appeal that the township or the county, we follow the process, we follow the Planning Act, and we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's so that we're not hopefully ever into a situation where we don't like ending up at the Ontario Land Tribunal ever, but if we do end up being there, that we are not going to be on the side that is going to be worried costs. So some of the changes. So finally, that was the end of the first presentation part, and then so here's some of the key changes that have happened over the last couple of months. So Bill 109 is recent, and we've probably heard a lot from the province about being in a housing crisis, and there's a big push to expedite planning approvals, and you see this in brackets, and to incite timely decisions. And I'm not really a fan of that word. It's more like to not really incentivize them, the municipalities to make timely decisions. They're penalizing you for not making timely decisions. So they want to increase housing supply, and say one of the ways that we can do this is speeding up approvals, and to encourage municipalities to speed up approvals. They said if you don't have them within certain timeframes, you're going to have to start giving refunds back to people, to applicants. So if you don't have an application that, for example, a zoning bylaw amendment, you'll see decisions that are made within 90 days, no refund. So that's sort of their timeline. So that's essentially 3 months, and that's incredibly tight. So, for example, if you start adding up the days that the Planning Act application, so if we have 90 days to make a decision, you have 30 days to, after an application to come in. So your first 30 days, you can just review it to make sure you have a complete application. After the application is deemed complete, you have 15 days to get a notice out. So we're at 45. And that notice has to be given 20 days in advance of a public meeting. So now we're at 65 days. And then, assuming all your timelines have worked out perfectly, after you're making a decision right there, then there's a 20-day appeal period. I'm sorry, the 20-day appeal period doesn't count back because you made a decision. But essentially, you're 60 days waiting. That's 2/3 of your time just in notice requirements under the Planning Act. And that doesn't take into any consideration on, for example, if you only hold, for some councils, they only hold one council meeting a month or maybe 2. But so those timelines waiting to get on the agenda and all that. So you can see very quickly, and that's just for a straightforward application with no issues, that just under the Planning Act alone, getting a decision done in 90 days is doable, but it is tight. Most municipalities in Ontario, I think the province did a survey and when they passed this legislation, they look in across Ontario, so it's not. Includes all the GTA and all those people, but it was closer to beyond 210 days was the average. So the province essentially passed this legislation saying, right now municipalities, you are achieving this 210 days, and we want you to do it in 90 days. But they didn't change any of the processes, they didn't change what you're required to look at, they didn't change any of those timelines of the plan act, they just said, take that 210-day process and do it in 90 days. And then it's up to, and if you don't, you have to start giving refunds. And so, for example, any application that takes longer than 210 days, it's a 100% refund, and that's obviously gonna impact the school budget. So the idea is we don't want to give the refunds, we want to meet these timelines. So how do we do it? So we created a working group. We invited all of the local municipalities to participate, so any of their staff wanted to participate in this working group, saying, hey, here's the situation we're in. Province wants to make, we want to improve our planning processes. I think that's a good goal. I don't think anybody objects to having efficient time processes, but how do we do this in a way that we can actually achieve it? So we wanted to identify and implement opportunities to improve or revamp the process so that we're doing this in a timely manner. We wanted to have a consistent approach across the county, and ultimately we want to avoid that financial hit of having to provide fee refunds. And so the concept or the idea that we had, and this is something that many municipalities across Ontario are doing. We talked about that journal inquiry. This is why I put so much emphasis on the journal inquiry and complete application requirements. So the idea was to front end or say enhance that front end review. So right now, the timelines, when we're not meeting those timelines, the biggest reason why we're not is because there's been a back and forth between staff, either at the municipal level or the county level, or it could be within a provincial ministry, or it could be a peer reviewer. So some of those, and all those, when we're trying to check those tick boxes and making sure that we made all the policy, there are all those different agencies, there are all those different people that have a stake in it. And so we have to make sure that everybody has checked their boxes and say we're okay with this development before we can move forward. And sometimes it would result in the back and forth. So when you would say, well, you've got your proposal, we're not okay with it, what you have here, but if you shift it this way, we'd be okay with it. And then so I go back to the developer and they consider it for a couple of weeks and they come back and there's this back and forth that essentially occurs. And when that happens, as you heard from under the planning act, those timelines, we can't meet that 90 days. We're past that 90 days. If we it takes a couple of weeks, we're past it and we're into refunds. So the idea is, yes.
Does that 90 days start when I sign saying I've got a complete application and send it to the county?
Correct.
That's when it starts.
It starts.
The county has 30 days to get it back to me.
It starts as soon as they will pay your money and you look at it and say, yes, this is a complete application. That's the clock starts ticking. And unfortunately, it doesn't have one of the things that we asked the province to do or consider was put a stop the clock clause. I'm not sure if anybody's seen those chess players when they're on the clock, they're hitting the thing back and forth. So you have a certain amount of time to make your move. But we asked for that, saying, okay, if you're gonna give us 90 days, at least give us like an ability to stop the clock and say, okay, now it's the developer's turn and they're on the clock and that's not counting to 90 days, but they didn't do that. So technically, somebody could walk into the counter, pay their application, and if we ask for something, sit on it for 200 days, and then come in afterwards and say, oh, your application took too long, you have to give me my refund. And there's nothing the municipality can do about it because we can't stop the clock. So the clock is ticking.
So would it be better than if they took their application and went to see you guys to review it before it's submitted?
That's an option. So, well, I'll tell you what the proposal is. So the proposal is essentially to do that, is to front end a review.
Yeah.
So before they're even allowed, so the Planning Act allows a municipality to include your own policies, or in this case, the county government through the official plan to say, what do we want to be submitted with an application for us to be determined as complete? And so right now, it's just, for example, we want to have certain cases it might trigger an environmental impact study, for example. So we'll say to have a complete application, you have to submit your application, you have to submit an environmental impact study. That's all, so person can come to the counter, submits that information to us right now, and we'll take it, we'll start doing that, we'll review the environmental impacts today, we might pass off to a peer reviewer, who will have this back and forth, and then go over the time. Proposal is that before we deem complete, somebody will have to take their application to us, including their EIS, and we would bring that EIS, that environmental impact study, to a peer reviewer first, and say, okay, peer reviewer, does this meet the requirements? Let them have that back and forth, and before they submit their application, we want to have that clearance from whoever doing that review, saying, yes, this is a study that is a quality that passes the test. So that when it comes to the and say that this is a study that will supports the application, that meets all the requirements, and you can submit it with the application. What that will allow is then application when it's submitted, we don't have to have that back and forth with the reviewer, and we can just go boom, 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 under the Planning Act, meet our steps, and approve it. And we don't have to have that back and forth dialogue. There are drawbacks to it, because, and obviously there's a lot of upfront costs for the developer. They're not a huge fan of the potential delay or not being allowed to submit. So I know we realize that there's some pushback to that, but that was the sort of the best recommendations that we've come up with so far, and that a lot of many municipalities across Ontario are implementing this sort of procedure to pass a quality test ahead of time. Or for example, say it's we use MTO as a good example. So say one of the conditions or requirement is getting an MTO entrance. Instead of doing that, accepting a complete application and then going to MTO to get their sign off, if your application triggers an MTO review, we want proof from MTO before you submit that, before we deem that application complete. You come to us with your MTO approval, saying that MTO, yes, MTO is supportive of this proposal. Or until you achieve that approval, we're not going to accept your or consider your application. The other alternatives we considered was you just turning down applications. So day 89, we're still doing that back and forth between the developers. They haven't met their requirements yet under the official plan PPS, and therefore, okay, we don't want to be refunding applications, so see you later, we reject your applications tonight. Then that's going to result in a lot of angry ratepayers. It's going to result in no see, so it wasn't paid. It's not an ideal situation, and they have to start from scratch anyways. So we discussed it, but didn't feel that was a good situation. It would be more adversarial that way. So we want to try it again. So.
I mean, we kind of know our municipality, like where people are applying, kind of what they would be dealing with, but I think we would be best to recommend that they meet with new people and kind of get you to look at it, to see if there be any other things pop out.
So so right now there's a proposed official plan 35. So we held a public meeting that you were at in December. Well, your first county council meeting was a public meeting where we did have some of the developers out who weren't overly thrilled with the proposal, because it is a big change from how we do things right now. And there will be another public meeting being scheduled, so it hasn't been passed yet. So the policies are just are being considered. And what we're proposing is a two-step pre-consultation or two-stage general inquiry process. So step one would be currently what we have right now, where somebody has an idea, they can come to us and we'll highlight all those areas, and what you need an EIS or you need whatever supporting information you need to submit your application. Here are the steps or here are the requirements that you have to meet. That would be stage one. Then stage two would be, okay, you've got all your supporting information that we asked for during that stage one. Now we're actually going to look at it to make sure it's of a quality that's going to pass the test. And so it would be that would be the enhanced part. And then after they pass that second stage, then now you can submit your application to it. And then it will be complete and move through very quickly.
Is there gonna be a cost associated with that dynamic?
That's a great question. So right now, if the policies are adopted by county council, the second step that will be bringing forward a change to our revision. So staff would recommend cost to that. What it is, I don't know. And whether again we keep like that general inquiry free, like that state or the step one free, and then do a cost for the enhanced one. Because a lot of times, that's the majority of the cost for whether it's the county or your local staff, is that actual review, or the peer reviewer. So for example, the municipality has to go out and hire a peer reviewer to look at.
You're basically just changing the time of when you're doing that review to prior to your time when stopwatch starting.
Exactly.
You still have to do it whether it's before or after.
One of the other, we're not gonna go down this route, but I think mostly facetiously, but I think some municipalities were actually talking about doing it, was changing your application cost to zero. And having no fee for their application, then do a big pre-consultation fee, and then like, okay, well, a 100% refund of zero is still zero, so good luck. So, we're not going down that, we're not gonna be that sneaky. Again, we understand the need to, and we're supportive of speeding up the processes, but the unfortunate part is, the only thing that changed was the time that we have to make these decisions, and it didn't actually change the municipality's responsibility for what you have to actually look at, and the tests that you have to meet. None of that changed, or all the approvals or none of the, I'll say, red tape changed. There's just the timeline that you have to go through those processes has changed, which is challenging. Any questions on that before I move to the next one? So that public meeting for official plan number 35 is going to be coming up fairly soon, and once we get a decision by county council on that, that will sort of set in a cascading, again, everything sort of trickles down, and fees were going to be one of those discussions at the county and council. Okay, now what, or how do we deal with this now? All right, I think this is the last slide. We already talked about a lot of it, so a lot of it we won't have to go into. So Bill 23, this was passed on November 28th, and a lot of it came into effect just in January, so very new. Additional residential units, so this one doesn't apply, a lot of this actually doesn't apply to BLR, so we'll go through it very quickly. Additional residential units, 3 per lot, only applies in fully serviced areas. So if you're if you have a lot on full water and sewer anywhere in Ontario, no matter what the zoning bylaw says, this is the first time I've ever seen the province do it. They said our legislation trumps your zoning bylaw. And so normally, I said, normally everything trickles down from the province. They start off and then municipalities have to implement things as it trickles down. This is the first time, and I've ever seen it, where the province has said, we don't care where we're not gonna wait for this trickle down stuff. Every lot in Ontario on full services, you are allowed 3 dwelling units on that property.
So on non-service, what is it?
So depends on, right, so there's criteria. I don't know if I'm connected to the internet.
What is that criteria?
So if you are in so we have an official plan policy. So the province, before Bill 109, one of the other earlier ones, they came out and said, we want to support more lots, just in general, or some more dwelling units. And so they said municipalities should adopt policies to allow 2 dwellings per lot wherever practical. But then they left up to municipalities to implement specific criteria. So if you're on full municipal water and sewer, you were already before this bill allowed 2, and now they changed it to a 3. But if you are on private services, so the criteria that is in the official plan and will be eventually trickled down to your zoning bylaw when we update it, which we can talk about if you're about to do it on the zoning bylaw stage. So if you have 2 hectares or greater, so 5 acre, if you have a 5 acre piece of property, you are allowed, you will be allowed in the Mid Township updates and zoning bylaw 2 dwellings on that 5 acres with no study requirements or no additional requirements. So you can have those 2 dwellings as you see fit. They don't have to share a well and septic system or anything like that. You're allowed 2 separate or whatever, 2 dwelling units, just 2 dwelling units on a property 5 acres and bigger. If you are between 0.8 hectares, so 2 acres and 5 acres, if you're within that sort of area, you will be allowed to have 2 dwelling units without any study requirements, but the only requirement being that those 2 dwelling units will have to share the same well system and the same septic system. So you can't have 2 systems, but you, as of right, you will be allowed to have 2 dwelling units on that lot between 2 and 5 acres. If you have between 0.4 acres and 0.8, so if you have a lot that's between 1 and 2 acres, you are not allowed to have one as of right. But we talked about the different approval processes. so the policy says you can submit they're encouraged. You're encouraged to have 2 dwelling units on it if you can do it, but you have to get a minor variance and you have to get a hydrogeological study done. And so the hydrogeological study would look at your well on your area, so look at your soils, everything, and your water quality. Do you have enough water to service 2 dwelling units from that well without having impacts on your neighbors? So making sure, looking at your surrounding neighbors as well, making sure that you're not taking up more water than the area can support. And number 2, looking at the density of the development of your area, not specific for your lot, how many lots are around you. If you add another septic system for adding more nitrogen in the area, you want to make sure that we're not having an impact on the groundwater. So between 1 and 2 acres, the answer is generally you're going to be able to do it, but we want the study done to make sure that we're not going to have any negative impacts on your neighbors.
So greater than 5 acres,
Good to go.
you can sever or no?
So the secondary dwelling, you cannot sever from the main dwelling. It's one of the requirements under the Planning Act. So if you want to get it severed, so the rule is have the 2 building lots separate first, and then you can build on it.
So what is the minimum or maximum amount of severed lots on if you own a lot? So you own a lot that's, I don't know, 10 acres.
So that's where we encourage you to do a pre-consultation, because there's so many features on the landscape that could impact whether somebody could get a severance or not. Come talk to us first, and it will be a lot, very specific by the lot. But general rules, so you had a 100 acre, 100% rural, no land use issues, just to say that. The rule start off with 3 severances. You're allowed three severances from the holding. And then after those 3 lots are developed, so after there's houses on those, and there's certain criteria you can meet, if you can meet additional criteria, you get 2 more for up to 5. So we call it a 3+2 policy. So originally you get 3, after you meet certain criteria, you can get additional 2 for that. And beyond 5 is discouraged.
So if you bought a chunk of land from someone that had previously developed or not developed, but severed 3 lots, but you bought a chunk of land that was say 15 acres, you can't do anything with the
Yeah,
because the previous person didn't develop the 3 that.
correct.
So that's where it stops. If they're not developed, you don't, even though you purchased something, has nothing to do with the other 3, you can't do anything with it.
Correct. And so the whole point of that policy was trying to avoid, well, there's 2, I think there's multiple. This is a policy that was in place far before my time, but my understanding is if one encourages lots to be developed, so they're not just sitting vacant, that to encourage growth in your township, but then also put some pressure on the people that get.
So you have to hound your neighbors to build a house or you're screwed.
Or not sell to somebody who actually wants to build, because then also one of the issues, the biggest issue with doing severances compared to plans of subdivision is that we're not doing that comprehensive look at how is this, if we develop these lots, how is this gonna impact the whole community or the whole area. So there's not a comprehensive look at well and septic systems. There's not a comprehensive look at stormwater management. So all those types of things that for example, if you look at a plan of subdivision, it doesn't really look at a severance application. So if all of a sudden we start severing lots and they haven't been developed yet, and we just keep on adding more and more, if those issues come up, then we don't have the ability to adapt or to address those issues if those other lots have been created. So by requiring those lots to be developed first, if something does happen, or if all of a sudden we realize, oh, we actually need an easement through here for drainage because all these people build on the property and directing drainage this way, and now we've got a problem. If there's more lots, that could really additionally just adds on to the complication. So the idea is get those lots developed, make sure that there's not going to be any issues with before we start adding on to it. So that's where there's a 3+2 came from.
When you're in the acreage of having, being allowed to put 2 dwellings on it to share a septic and well, and you have 1 dwelling and you want to put the second dwelling on it, and they have to tie into the septic. What's the purpose of sharing?
So to keep them close together as much as possible, and then also to, less of that issue of wanting to get a severance afterwards too. So that it really ties them together, saying these two dwellings have been approved on the principle of them being together and that they're shared. So they're sharing the same well, sharing the same septic. And also when you're on that side, and hydrogeology will be able to explain to you better, but there's also, I think it's under, can't remember the specific act, maybe it's the Ontario Water Resources Act, but there's circles and radiuses that you build, you put around wells, there's radiuses you put around septic systems, saying making sure all these things stay away from each other. So when you're on that smaller scale, and so say you had 1 acre, you wanted to put 2 septic systems or 2 wells, now all of a sudden you are creating a circle and impacting your neighbor's properties as well, what they can use their property for. So it's really going to limit.
Even though you may need to upgrade your septic and your tank, but you still have two wells.
You need to, absolutely, most likely you will need to.
Yeah, I can see the benefits to that, but I can see the negatives of it too, right? Just because you got 2 people in 2 houses getting along now. that
Right, you
doesn't
won't
say-
both of them.
Yeah, you're the owner
You're the
of both.
owner of both of them.
Yeah,
It's like me if I wanted to build a property or a house, I guess, with under 10 units.
yeah,
Because, my kids and grandkids, and they all wanna live as a commune or
Yeah.
something.
yeah,
Why you wanna do that, if you beyond me, but I mean, you could,
you could, yeah.
but that you kind of,
I
it
guess
allows
that-
you to do that,
yeah.
but you're kind of,
I
you're
guess
afraid because no one owns it, only one person owns it.
Yeah,
Or owning a piece of land where you have 2 houses and one of your kids or somebody lives there. If you die,
Yeah.
it just leaves a mess for your family to clean up.
well, that's what I'm getting
That's
at.
all,
I mean,
all it does
that's-
leaves a mess.
That's.
What's
what
the
I'm-
resale value then?
Well, I mean,
Well, yeah,
what it does
that's
is
my
leaves a
thought,
mess.
right? That's-
If, you know, if you, it's kind of a crazy thing to say you can do, it just leaves a disaster for the people behind.
Well, that's what I'm going to do,
Oh, yeah.
it's kind of like, yeah.
So,
But again, they're trying to promote
Remote.
But you,
Housing,
yeah,
more
right?
housing, so they're not thinking,
but you can't sever more lots to promote more housing because your hands are tied,
Yeah.
is what I'm getting at.
I guess anyone that has questions about development or doing something, the best thing to say is go to the county and do a
Yes.
free
For
consultation.
sure.
I know,
because-
that's why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah,
And seeing what somebody did a long time ago now impacts me.
and so we're trying, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't force people that own other pieces of property to develop, so you're screwed.
Yeah.
So you're the one that's screwed. You can't
Because-
force other people to
No.
develop land. Yeah, could have put you in a bad spot.
Yeah,
You check all the boxes.
Yeah.
With the exception of a bunch of people close to you, not on top of you, but close to you, haven't developed their land.
Yeah.
So you're afraid. Yeah, it's not very good.
No.
So you can't promote growth in the township. You don't get more tax dollars. Yeah, it stymies growth, is what it does.
The other, just one other point on the second, why to make them share when it's a smaller lot size, is we like to have replacement septic areas. So for example, if that septic system fails, it's nice to have a property that's big enough to build a replacement bed. And so if you have 2 dwelling units on that smaller property with 2 septic systems, then you don't have that, if that bed were to fail, you don't have enough room to put a replacement on. So there's a few reasons why when it's a smaller lot, shared one, but after you're over 5 acres, and so it should be big enough that, you know, to.
Well, I think the minimum now is a hectare, isn't it? For the sevens.
Without a study, yes, so the absolute minimum is 1 acre, so 0.4 hectares is the minimum for a new lot on well and septic, but at that level, at that area, yes, you have to do a hydrogeological study. But if you want to avoid a hydrogeological study, then yes, it's 1 hectare. Yeah, so 1 hectare, and then you don't have to do a study.
yeah. Say what you want, but it's interesting how legislation is introduced in the past, and now we introduce, governments of the day introduce more legislation to try to bypass that legislation. It's quite a circle, right?
So when that first piece of legislation was passed, the province did they send out staff to do a little training, right? So I'm saying, here's our legislation, this is what, how we're supposed to implement this stuff. So I think it was in Mississippi, and also in Almonte, and we saw a whole bunch of, planners from all the local townships from Eastern Ontario were there. The problems was there, and they were talking about, how they wanted to do new growth, and so obviously, most of us were from rural Ontario, and so we're looking at the slides, and like every single one of your slides is in the, like, is on full service, and so obviously the question is, well, what do you do for properties on septic systems? And the person who was giving the presentation didn't know what a septic system was. So that's the,
Yeah.
so, yeah, we'll leave it at that. So there's challenges, so yeah. So, yeah, back to the slide. So a couple of changes. So if you are in full service areas, full municipal water, sewer, you are allowed 3 dwelling units per lot. So if you have a single detached house, a semi-detached house, or even a townhouse, you can now put 3 dwelling units onto that as of right, no matter what your township zoning bylaw says, which is new and interesting, and which, you know, new exciting opportunities for some people, and worrying infill for others, depending on your.
Your neighbors might not be so thrilled.
You know.
I have a piece of land that you could do that with. Might make the neighborhood a little unhappy with you.
So, yeah, depending on your context, whether you're happy with that change or not happy, so I'll leave it to you
It's a
to add your own
good
opinions. Yeah, so, site plan, we already talked about that, site plan changes, couple of changes for site plans. So we talked about not being applicable to under 10 units anymore. They also took out a whole bunch of things that can be reviewed during site plans, so removes like exterior design and some landscaping, and so a bunch of things that comes coming back and said, you know, we don't, municipalities, you can no longer regulate these types of things. And what Bill 109, this slide says Bill 23. Bill 109 also made changes to site plan control. And I was just thinking, well, at the very beginning, I said, you know, we talked about the Planning Act, and it recognizes the importance of council, recognizes the decision-making of council. Site plan approvals was taken away from council. It's the council, you don't go to make the site plan decisions anymore, and it's mandatory that you delegate to a staff member the approvals. I think BLR, you guys have delegated that to your CAO, with my understanding. We need to pass that legislation, I'm not sure. But now we have some example bylaws that we can show you to choose. Essentially, the township has to choose somebody and delegate that approval function, and so site plans no longer come to council. So long within your, so still a municipal, the municipality jurisdiction,
CIO.
just not council. No more public meetings for plans of subdivision. So they said, yeah, we don't, I was watching a press conference with, I think it was Minister Clark, and he was asked by the press about this change, and essentially the answer he was given was, we are past NIMBYism. So all these things, all these meetings, they result in concerns from the public, or just don't want it in their backyard, and we're past that. We're to the point we need to build houses, and so no more public meetings for plans of subdivision, and there's no appeal rights for plans of subdivision either. So if you're a neighbor and somebody is proposing to develop a plan of subdivision next to you, you cannot appeal that to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I'll just jump down to that one just because it's relevant. Third-party appeals for minor variances and consent applications as of Bill 23, no more appeals. So for your minor variances or for county Brentford consent applications, a third-party person, so a neighbor cannot appeal that decision of either the county or the
It's gonna
township.
move things along for developers.
It will.
They shouldn't be unhappy with that.
So, well,
But there is still for zoning bylaws
still is for zoning bylaws, yes.
and public meetings.
And yes, so there's still public meetings for official plans and zoning bylaw amendments, and there's still appeals for those applications. But, but not for minor variances or consent applications or plans of subdivision. You guys don't have development charges, so that doesn't impact you, but if you care, you're significantly reduced the amount and how much and what municipality can charge development charges to. I think AMO did a study for like across Ontario, these changes will essentially take, I think it was like $5 billion out of development charges that municipalities as a whole are able to do. So it's about some municipalities, especially again, it's GTA centric, that's where like a lot of these focuses are, and they're saying it's could have like up to like a 25% impact on the tax levy by not having the ability to recoup some of these charges, but you don't have your own charges, so you don't have to worry about it. So no worries. We don't have the conservation authority, so there's the The change significantly reduced the conservation authorities' jurisdiction, what they could do in their, within their control. But we don't have a CA, so it's not a change for us. And at the very bottom, it's not part of Bill 23, but so at the very top, we have, you know, again, like going back to that hierarchy, when the province makes changes to the PBS, and everything has to trickle down. The province has announced, they haven't shown, you haven't released any drafts or actually any dates yet, but they've announced that they intend to do an overhaul of the provincial policy statement in the coming term of this government. So when that actually happens, then we'll get more information, but that will trigger a cascading effect, as it always does, which we just got through our 7-year official plan review. We got our, it's supposed to be every 5 years, you're supposed to review the official plan anyway, so we got through our 7-year review over 5-year review. And so a change to the provincial policy statement will trigger one of those again, which will trigger updates to your zoning bylaw, which we haven't even gotten to.
Yeah.
What's the number in the subdivision? What constitutes subdivision?
There is no minimum number, so, and typically, you could, in theory, do a 1-lot plan subdivision. So the smallest one that we have, that we're doing right now is for 5 lots.
And then that, does subdivision change the severance thing?
Yes. Yeah, so, so that consent, how many consents is for severances?
Costs a little more money to set up a subdivision.
It does cost some more money and involves more detailed review. Just when people try to, sever off it and do that.
As opposed to subdivision. But you can have subdivisions with your own well and septic somewhere.
Absolutely, that's the majority of them, you went for kind of with that. And we made, there's a new policy that we put in through the last official update as well. Before plans of subdivision could only occur if you built, or they, all the lots had frontage on an open, maintained public municipal road. And so if you didn't have that, you could build it, but you have to build to municipal standards and give it to the municipality. So there's a brand new policy for small plan subdivisions, saying that we will consider private road subdivisions where somebody could, subdivision on private road.
Going back to the old days,
But, yes, but,
and do you know what those private roads, the problems they cause municipalities?
so there's either do it by plan climate or with joint use, like much, you're not gonna revert back to those old days.
Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of those old ones, they weren't designed to be on private roads. They were, it's just, there were requirements that were put in place to have them be brought up or built to municipal standards, but the developers just walk away because they didn't have the teeth or securities to implement it. So we've learned from those days. We're not gonna go all the way back there, but again, it was one of those policies to provide some additional flexibility. So in cases where like it was a small lot plan subdivision, that option was there for municipalities to consider, provided we put in those appropriate protections for the municipality, recognizing that this is going to be a private road and making sure that there's a plan put in place that will not involve the municipality ever taking ownership of the road, and making sure that there's a plan in place and procedure in place that's on title, that those lot owners know and are aware of their responsibilities for the ongoing maintenance of that road long term. So that's not, so that didn't come back to the municipality, because yes.
And has anyone ever proposed, because of the kind of the green movement, a subdivision that's all off grid?
I'm sure they have some work, but not in the county.
Not yet. I was just wondering if anybody's tried
We
that.
do have individual lots that are.
Oh, for sure.
In,
I was just thinking of something low grand or where somebody said, oh, if you come live here, it's completely off grid and it's better for the environment. For the unique group of people that might want to live like that.
we do have one that's not quite to that extent. Yeah, one subdivision, so pre-consultation, so I can't give, so we can't give out any details on it. But they are proposing, let's say, a more sustainable style of development, but it's not to the extent of where it's off grid. There's still be a hydro to the property, and still like water and it would be more like proposing communal well and septic systems as opposed to individual ones, so they're employing and trying to implement some of those green standards and more of a condominium style where the condominium would create and maintain property in a natural state. You can charge some of those things, but not off grid.
But, no,
Not completely, like, it would still have its own, well, then, be off grid other than hydro, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be, I think that would be. Yeah, just go over your zoning, so, yeah, with the zoning bylaw, there is a proposal, we are in the process of updating zoning bylaws across the county. We haven't started rooting out inbounds and right things yet, you guys are close to being near the top now of projects that we have ongoing. So as we get closer and as we start knocking some of these projects off, and completing them, then we'll try and start the next one.
Yeah.
Just like we did with the official plan, where we, there's one official plan that 10 million, municipalities are sharing. We can't do that for a zoning bylaw because each individual municipality is responsible for passing their own zoning bylaws.
Yeah.
Because we're starting off with all the same policies, what we did do is we drafted a template, so here's a template that matches the policies, and then, so we bring it to the township saying, here's a good starting point. And then we highlight the areas, so a lot of the issues, like I said, through the presentation, are provincial interests that you really don't have the ability to have a say in. And then there are a whole host of issues that municipalities get into, like, how do you want to regulate a specific thing? So if you're reading the leader, you've seen a lot of comments on Osher Valley and recreational vehicles, for example. So, that's an example where that's not really a provincial interest, and there's significant impact or interest in how the municipal decision on decides how or if to allow people to live in or stay in recreational vehicles on their property. So that, for example, would be one of the choices that to you as well comes to this direction, how do you want to deal with this particular issue or Airbnbs or.
interesting, yeah, and that smaller home footprint as well, right?
Yes,
Is it county?
so that's absolutely within your, gonna be one of your decisions. So a lot of municipalities in the past have included minimum dwelling areas. Something that our template does not include, so we've taken that out. There are under the building code, if somebody's to follow the building code and meet all, I think there's a certain size and sort of the building code footprint saying that's typically how big a building has to be. So we have not put that into our template of the zoning bylaw, just recognizing that there is this movement to build as small as possible. So as long as it meets the building code, we did not include any minimum lot areas for the rules for the standards, but that's something you just talk. That's definitely part of the conversation that we can have.
Things to discuss when we get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I know you had kind of set up, when I was there, you had that schedule, and it was like, you're in 3 municipalities at the time, out of the 12, and I think we're somewhere up in the third group.
So we're doing our best, but some staffing shortages has.
Yeah, well, and everything else that changes too, that you gotta keep up with, right, so.
We're doing our best, we've got a really good team, and hopefully we get some new great additions to our team as well, so let's go. So, I have some notes I did follow.
No,
But,
it's good.
yeah, any other questions?
Yeah.
Very informative.
It's good. Yeah, and as always, like, we're here, you guys have our contact information, we're here providing you guys support. Yep. And, so if you're always happy to come up here, if you have any questions, we're happy to come back into council and your staff have our contact information and we're provided whatever you need from us.
Thank you very much.
Good,
That was
thanks.
very good. Planning board is, world of its own.
Oh,
And all we know is that there's gonna be more changes.
Yeah, no, change is the constant, right?
It is constant, for sure. Yeah, so I'll pull this, for that back to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank
The
you, thank
change is
you.
kind of more
Yeah, fair enough.
in the job, I guess.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Do we want to take a 5-minute recess?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Smoke week?
we'll recess for.
Oh, I don't need a small.
I told them we have provisions in our human resources policies for that.
For smoke break for the non-smokers, perfect.
That's gonna work.
All right, have a good evening.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice to get you.
Thank you. You recording tomorrow? I'm sorry.
I'll be back to order. And our next order of business is bylaw number 2023-16. That we, the council of the corporation of the township of Brunel and Dr. Ragland, hereby adopts bylaw number 2023-16, being a bylaw for the regulation of traffic by imposition of reduced load limits on specified highways. Could I get a mover for that motion, please? Second. Moved by Councilor Capel, seconded by Councilor Claude. Any discussion? No?
Not for me.
All as well.
Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Those against? Motion carried. When do they go in effect?
Load restrictions,
Yeah.
we're gonna play it by ear and, the weather,
When the
it's probably
signs
gonna
are up?
line up close to the 50, I would think, as normal, but, depending on the weather.
Yeah.
It'll be announced, be in half the paper, it'll be on our website,
Okay.
and you'll see the signs with the dates changing.
We kind of trend towards when the county puts theirs.
Yeah, I'm gonna work with the county and we kind of all go in together, so that it's kind of uniform across the board.
Which makes sense.
I am looking at our signage and typically in the past, the roads department would pull the date plate off of the sign. I don't feel that's adequate enough because the remaining portion of the sign stays up year round and people are kind of getting a mixed emotion on it. I would like to get some hinges and a fold down piece of sign that says in effect. So that it's either in effect or it's hinged up and it's not in effect. And it kind of clears things up a bit.
So we're double-sided sign.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll move on to the draft budget. Continue on.
Okay, so any of the changes that council wanted to put in, I have highlighted in yellow. I've also put in a 1.5% tax levy increase. So taxation is on page 2, highlighted in yellow. That's for the 1.5% increase.
Do we have any federal PILs? Okay. Because we haven't been paying. So what's the bottom line on this, that it's zero, right?
1.5% increase on page 1, we're still at a deficit of about 6,200.
How much?
6,200. Now, one thing that I think I did get some more quotes on the server, and I think we can cut that 25,000 down to 15.
So there's 10.
And we still don't know the exact number for the debenture for the grader yet either, so those numbers are highlighted as well on page 9. I should have those exact numbers next week. I also worked out what a 2% increase would be. So you're looking at a surplus of $984 as is. 2% increase.
Okay.
And Madam Mayor, you had asked about the growth rate.
Yes.
0.57%.
Oh, that's not very nice. Where did you cost the new truck to?
It was split between
Oh, I see, building department and roads.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I see that now. Eddie had a big smile on his face.
So we're still there then,
we secured the truck. I ended up getting it for 27 even, and 27,000 even. So that knocked down, there were some repairs required, safety. Those were taken care of. We all right.
Yeah.
It sure is white.
Drives nice, I drove well. Your test drove it really well.
Yeah.
So then you said you can cut the server down to 15?
Yes.
What are we cutting corners on? About the price that much.
I had actually contacted Dell, because what we have right now is a Dell server. And got them to price out something similar to what we have.
Mhm.
Just with some more upgrades.
Commercial product, not consumer, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe because it's through Dell and we do have, an account through them, so we get municipal pricing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there should be provincial government pricing there.
Yeah, so I
It's
think
all
that
that
was,
costs.
I think that was the big difference.
Yeah, that would be where the discount is, huh?
Mhm.
And the guy that does the work, will still do the work for you, even though if you purchase on your own or not?
So,
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we should.
yes.
Yes. Okay, that's good.
That's good.
There's our,
And there,
Our
did Dell quote the software as well?
Yeah, everything that we
Yeah,
were.
all the, with licensing. Okay.
So.
so anyone have any more questions on the budget, any concerns, any comments, any?
So you said around 16,000?
Give it 15, and that's with, would be with the cost of getting it all hooked up.
That would include it being all over and hooked up. 15.
So then, is that in the budget? No, that's not in the budget.
We
We have 25 in the
No, I
budget right
know.
now.
But if we really do that, if things stay the same, then we're positive.
Yeah, you'd be in a surplus.
Yeah, good
With
service,
a
yeah.
1.5%
Yeah.
increase.
The only thing I see in the risk at all is the 40 on the bulldozer.
The 40 on which?
For the grader,
No, I think it's bulldozer, isn't it? That we talked about this position of the bulldozer. Oh, wow.
What page is that?
Or is that factored in?
Revenues, I don't even think it's factored in.
Oh, it's not factored in at all?
Did we have factory equipment sales?
No.
Okay, so then you're, okay, oh, you don't have to worry, that's not factored in, then you're gonna be surplus?
Because you can't,
No guarantee.
Yes.
No, I know, that's what I was wondering, if we model and use that,
Yeah.
then we have a risk. If we didn't, we're in good shape.
Yeah.
And you budgeted for, there was budget for the new machine, right? It's in there.
It's budgeted,
Yeah,
it's also
yeah.
being pulled from
Yeah,
reserves.
yeah,
for
no,
alcohol,
so,
Yeah.
so, yeah, you'll have some surplus.
Now, the 4,500 in there for the seniors lunch club, if we get the grant, that wouldn't be. the grant would cover the seniors lunch.
That's a dandy lunch, I want to go now.
What's the number?
it's for the year.
Or, oh, that's what they do. So that's a good one, I'm going.
You can, you can't, you have to budget for it if you wanna offer the
Yeah.
service.
Yeah.
If you get the grant,
Oh, yes, if you
you
get the
put
grant,
it
you
in
get the grant.
reserve for
Yeah,
next
exactly.
year.
Yeah.
If you don't have the grant, you know, like that's.
Yeah, you don't plan on the grant, it's just.
No, grants are,
You have to plan on the actual
Yeah.
spending, you know.
So that's all built in there, so we're in good shape, I think, right?
Yeah.
It looks good anyways to me.
And one thing I should mention is Val and I had a meeting with a couple members of the Four Seasons Park Committee on Friday afternoon. They have quite a large project that they would like to go ahead with this year. They're hoping to get some grant funding. But I did have a call back after the meeting on Friday afternoon, wondering if the township would be willing to help out with any funding for the project.
So is there a project plan in place that we could look at?
we don't really have anything on paper yet, but it involves a pad 40 by 50 feet with fencing around it. It would be for pickleball, basketball,
Foursquare,
pardon?
Foursquare,
Yeah, there's a game called Foursquare, I don't know what it is, but there's 4 squares painted in one corner. And over on the other corner, they have painted for hopscotch. And, was there volleyball on there also?
yeah, they want to be able to put the nets in the pad. for-
Yeah,
So there'd be
so,
pockets to
Yeah,
allow for that volleyball, potentially then maybe even tennis, would tennis
Yes.
be as well? That'd be
and
nice.
they plan to put 3-foot gates on each end, so people in wheelchairs and whatever will be
Wheelchair accessible,
accessible for them. Like, it's really,
It sounds really good.
yeah, they're in the process of getting plans.
Mhm.
But they've got,
boats and whatnot.
yeah,
They
and
haven't got all the financial, the budget put together yet, right, or is it, do they have like round pricing, rough order of magnitude
no,
pricing?
they don't, they're still gathering.
Yeah.
On that, but
It
they're
sounds
thinking,
good.
they're thinking of also doing a program with outdoor movies.
Mhm.
You know, like if they have a screen and, sell popcorn and whatever, you know, like,
Yeah.
they have lots of good plans, so they will get the pricing together and they'll come to the township and,
Yeah, no, it'd be nice if we could see the, kind of the budget for it.
Yeah.
What's the timeline, when would they like to do
this year, but, I mean, we have to get the pricing.
it? Yeah, because the big thing
Apply
is,
for a grant,
you kind of have to move quickly because pricing is a moving target, right?
yeah,
That's what I was wondering, because you have to get things put together pretty quickly, summer's coming, right?
Yeah.
To align the trades to make it happen.
Find somebody to do it also.
Yeah, that's what I mean, the trades align,
Yeah, right,
align up the
you know.
trades.
well, she's had people in giving her quotes.
Well, that's good.
So it seems to be, and they were also wondering if we could help out with doing some work there in the summer with students, and we said, well, if we get the number of students that we apply for,
Yeah.
we'll be looking for some projects for them to do, so, you know, it's all dependent on that, so.
It definitely sounds nice, I'll be honest with you, it's pretty nice project. Be
And they
good for
have-
the community.
They had 447 people registered for their program.
Is that right?
They do a lot of fundraising though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Marlene, she's a go-getter, all right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. You have to do that to make it work, right?
Yeah, so anyway, that was their plan, so she was
Sounds good.
wondering, I see you put some money in to the,
Electrified.
10,000? Yeah. Special
The
revenue.
revenue, yeah,
I see that.
I doubled that because of how much was brought in from the boat run.
Yeah.
Right,
And they have the mud run planned, and another ball tournament this fall too, so then they probably have raised that by.
but yeah, they'll, the number there, they'll raise, because they're almost there. with
Yeah.
the poker, this new one.
Small, that was, yeah. Did I miss something on what you said?
Sounds really good, are they kind of well on their way with trying to get applications filled out for,
For prices?
no, for the grant?
No, they have to get the pricing first,
So,
and then you have to
that's
see what's
holding,
available
yeah,
at
that's
the time.
holding things up then.
Yeah, you can probably kind of pre-look and see what's available, so when they come in, you know what they need. So anything else?
Going on the draft budget, it looks pretty good.
It looks good to me
Yeah,
too.
it's pretty darn good.
Good job. And I see you changed the elections to 4,000.
Yes, yeah.
Makes sense.
Everything we talked about seems to be included.
Yeah,
And I did speak with the CDO about the courses and training.
Yes.
Number that,
yeah,
depending on what's available this year.
yeah. Sounds good,
There should always be some budget for that.
yeah.
You have to plan, you need to plan to develop your people. Always have to find ways to do that no matter what.
And the county fees for planning and development, well, I mean, that's a guess because it's usually revenue neutral because you
Yeah.
collect what you pay out.
So it pretty well zeros out.
It does, yeah,
So that's not too hard to plan for.
no.
Maybe another thing council should think about, maybe discuss with the council remuneration.
Yeah.
It's 125 for the council, I want to pick up the name.
And what about special meetings?
It's especially
Same.
noticing, that's,
Okay, what about if you attend a meeting outside of the municipality?
we don't have,
Nothing.
there's mileage you can claim,
Yeah.
What's the mileage rate?
45 cents a kilometer.
Well, that has to change to whatever the CRA rate is. That should,
Yeah,
that should automatically
it's
change to that.
68
You
cents
should
up
follow
to,
along.
Yeah,
68 cents up to the first is a 4,000,
4 or 5.
yeah, and then 60 cents after.
Okay, so is that direction then from council to, or do you have to
Well, that would go into the
Whatever.
bylaw, wouldn't it?
wage final?
Yeah,
Yeah. That'll have to be part of the,
Or
Yeah,
does
it's
the bylaw just say it follows?
because that's what the county,
Yeah, it follows the county.
or.
and that's what they follow.
Yes, Canada Revenue Agency.
Well, I think it's unfair that if council goes to something outside of the municipality, that they don't get paid.
And we do have a committee which is
Yes, that's right.
half of what a council meeting rate is.
Yeah.
If council want to consider,
I mean, no one's here to make your fortune, because you're never going to. But the out of pocket that a person in this office puts out, no one will ever know. If you don't have, if you're living from paycheck to paycheck, you don't run for this position,
You know,
put it that way.
I think a fair starting point would be, for me, I think you should gather up some information from municipalities that are similar to the same size. And see what their remuneration is or how they're paid.
Yeah.
And bring a report back to council
because that's
Because-
public knowledge, right?
Yeah,
on, yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it
that's
should-
public knowledge.
Easy to find.
Yeah, 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 because
So
Renfrew
they
County
just
does.
print up a sheet every once in a while.
Yeah,
saying
Renfrew
whatever,
County does a report every
Yeah.
year. On different municipalities.
telling how much each counselor makes and
Yeah,
like in each township.
we always post our remuneration after departments.
and I was talking to some of them at county council saying we were going to review and, the guy from Petawawa said that whatever the COLA increase is, that all the staff get.
Yeah.
That's what council gets every year, it goes
Yeah.
across the board.
So if
So
it's
they
3% or 4% or whatever.
This year it was 2%, it was 2%.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
It does, yeah. It saves reviewing it every so many.
Well,
years.
you're getting the same, so, you know, like, you're getting the same increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
makes it-
take
makes
that
it
over
easy.
10 years,
I think the option is too, what we have to look at as a council is whether you're happy with a per diem. Or a per diem meeting, or simply so much a month that it doesn't matter how many meetings you have. That may make it easy for staff too, but those are some of the things I think.
Yeah.
In a report or whatever, options to bring back to council, so.
okay, you can bring that back then to us. See what. Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna compare to the renters and the Petawawas.
No,
Oh,
no,
no, you can't do that.
We can't,
no,
but, I mean,
Kind of like
other rural,
Killer,
Yeah.
Peggy Richard.
yeah.
HR,
Yeah.
Montreal Valley, Head Clare Maria.
Manifest Valley,
No,
Ed Carmari is pretty,
They got 300 people in their
Yeah.
township.
ooh,
It's kind of rare.
yeah,
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 but they're still paying more than us.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Probably.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
They're compensated.
Almost after her county council.
Yes.
She sits in front of me. Okay.
Because actually, you know, you talk to a lot of people and then, very few people look at your actual remuneration. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people ask me, well, how much do you make here? And you tell them and they're just like, you're not serious, are you? And
Yeah.
yes,
Well, you almost look at it like it's a volunteer job.
It-
No, it is.
It is.
You're doing
Yeah.
that.
Cause I mean, I've been here twice, meeting with ratepayers.
Yeah.
That I get nothing for.
that's right, yeah. And I did lots of that too.
Yeah.
When I was mayor too. so.
You're giving back a lot.
Yeah, it is, it's,
You back way more than what you take.
But I mean, that's the assumption when you sign up.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, and people
absolutely.
think that you don't do nothing.
Yeah.
It's- So, but anyway, you can bring it back to us and we'll
Yeah.
take a look at it.
Okay. Is there anything else council wants to?
So you wanna look at that before you finalize the budget or?
Yeah, we won't finalize the budget tonight, we have to pass it on all after that. And I think we need to, wait till the tax policy meeting, and that's next week. Yeah. Because of that industrial capping,
Okay.
cause that affects the tax rates.
And I have to get the final numbers for the venture too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Overall,
well, I'd say overall, we're in very good shape.
Yeah, looks good to me. The zero balances, we'll have surplus.
Yeah.
So in the event something goes a tiny bit sideways, we still good shape.
I do, so that's the plan.
Yeah, no, it's good.
That's always.
Yeah, well, you have to plan and you always,
Try and plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. Try and get there.
So my report is okay. My financial report is okay. Okay. So. We'll look at the draft procedure file. Who has questions, concerns, comments? So.
I thought it was done pretty well, it really did. I was comparing the two.
Yeah,
Yeah, this one is.
Yeah.
yeah.
And,
I almost found that the one that's presented to council a little more easier to navigate.
yes, yes.
Personally?
Yeah.
That's what I thought when I read it. Like I said, I had suggested maybe we have that the meetings are automatically adjourned at 10 o'clock, though, because past 10 o'clock is getting. People are tired.
Council in favor of that change?
I personally, why not leave 11, just, you never know, what could happen where you might have to go beyond and just by 15 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not gonna hurt
I
anything.
guess the other op- I
The
guess-
other option is that you can pass a resolution to extend it.
By 15 minutes, if you
Yeah.
figure that's all it's gonna take.
Yeah, and you can do that real time, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right then and
Right
there.
then and there, you can say, okay,
So then you're
we've got
protected.
what,
You're protected that way.
Because
Yeah.
even for staff, like, they're here all day, and then here until 11 o'clock at night and be back here the next morning, like, that's tough.
But I mean, we haven't went over. We
No,
haven't
it's-
to 11.
No, like our last meeting was what, 8:30?
Yeah, it was good.
that was like 2 delegations.
Yeah. Well, I would say 10 is perfect.
No, it doesn't matter to me, but it's in there already, don't know why. Why does it?
But like the mayor said, we
Says
can
11.
always make a motion to extend it by 15 minutes or whatever.
Well, with this in here, you wouldn't have to make that motion.
Yeah, I found,
If we get 11.
I found an example, and I can't give you the real example, but at a county council meeting, when some people tried to rush the meeting, to get it all in, and one member took exception to that and says, no, this is too important a decision, we can't possibly get through this. So then everybody rethought and agreed to come back the next day. And you know what? The decision was totally different and a better decision.
Well, when you're fresh, for sure. we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Hurrying something's never good if you're
Well,
trying to make an important decision.
no,
Sometimes those extra few hours just lets you rethink
Well,
things.
instead of go home
Yeah.
and sleep on.
and get your mind freshens and things. So.
It all depends what your day has been like anyways, you know,
Yeah.
when you're coming to a meeting at 7, so.
Yeah, well, this had been a meeting that we were in all day from 9 o'clock in the morning, and they decided at 25 they were gonna push it through. Go till maybe 6 or 6:30. That's too long.
Yeah.
And once you've worked all day and come here at night, by 10 o'clock, the
You're done.
decisions aren't quite as good as they could be.
Well, you're thinking about going to bed.
Yeah, I'm usually in there by now. So,
I go to bed at 10 and get up at 3.
I go better, tell you, my sleep,
What's that?
won't tell you my sleep.
All right, so is it staying 11 or going to 10?
I say 10, how many 10? Wayne?
It doesn't matter to me. I'm good either way.
Well, no, put up your hand if you want.
You can change it.
Okay.
if you want, Because
So it's
we
3 against 2.
can adjust the meeting.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
it
that's
is.
it.
She can't vote.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yes,
Oh, if it's a tie, yes, because they have voted yes.
Well, then you better read your procedural bylaw, because a tie results in a defeat.
If it's a tie,
But then the mayor can break the tie.
The mayor's.
That's what I say that.
I read somewhere when the vote is called for that the mayor's hand should go up if they're in favor. I don't know where it was.
It's not in here. I'm
That's the
telling you, I
idea, that's
read
the
it.
idea of having an odd number.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So right here, tie votes, any motion on which there is
What
an
page you on
equality of
first?
votes shall be deemed to be defeated.
What page are you on?
So you might wanna change that if you want your mayor to break the tie, page 23.
Well, no, I don't vote on the motions, but I do vote on.
Because I too understood that there was a tie, that the mayor broke the tie, but
Here it is on page 22. Voting.
what number, 13?
13-3, when the chair calls the vote, each member present will vote by raising their hand to indicate their agreement or disagreement with the motion on the table, except where disqualified to vote by reason of interest or otherwise. The chair shall vote at the same time as the other members on all questions. And if 5 people vote, you can't have a tie.
Right.
So that kind of contradicts what's over here.
What's over there, yeah.
Well, if you had 4 people at a meeting,
Yeah,
and we
try.
voted and
Someone
it was a tied vote, then it would be
Yeah.
a lost vote, it would be a no vote. If there was 1 member of council missing, it could be 5. And you are read it.
I'm gonna back this up a little bit to page 6, item 2.3, no meeting shall be canceled without the majority of council agreement. Are we in favor of that statement, or?
This minute.
Page 6, item 2.3. Sometimes there's situations where
Remember,
maybe a snowstorm or things
Yeah.
like that, where the meeting gets canceled, but not necessarily by majority of council. Do you want that statement left in or removed? Or revised?
what was in this one?
What would you revise it to?
Yeah, I was gonna see what was in here,
You could revise it that the mayor and clerk could make the decision. There are other items in there where the mayor and clerk would make a decision based.
but I thought you found that section in here, but I could have, I can't see it.
Yes, there was.
You know where it was?
That's just general meetings.
So in our previous, our current one, a meeting may be canceled by the head of council in consultation with the acting clerk in the following instances. Quorum cannot be achieved by council resolution in the event of unforeseen or significant event where the meeting is no longer required. For the purposes of that section, an unforeseen significant event includes but is not limited to the following, which is a safety concern, could be a snowstorm, loss of heater, electricity, or water, the clerk or deputy clerk's inability to attend, a state of emergency, the inability of required participants to attend, and or meeting becomes redundant.
What page is that on?
That's in,
21 in the old one.
yeah,
The old one. Item 4.6.
because I think that's a good thing to have. Because usually when you call, like cancel it, it's at the last minute and you may not have time to get a hold or have the time to get a hold of everybody.
Hopefully, you look at those, for people you can get a hold of, come to a meeting, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, no, everybody that have come so far.
Well, believe me, I check.
That got a text me.
I do, I send text, and if somebody doesn't answer right away, I'm sending it to somebody else up in the office, but are we on or are we not? Or make the drive? But everyone's good to respond, so I'm good, everyone's good to respond, so I don't worry about it too much.
I think if you could somehow word it like that,
Do you want, so incorporate item 4.6 of our old one into,
I would say incorporate it, but in your own.
Yeah.
words.
your own summation.
Yes.
there's a couple other little wording changes that I've just caught along the way in reviewing. Item 331 on page 7, the first year of a new term, the mayor shall at its first meeting, where it says the mayor shall, I have it the mayor may at its first meeting because we're not necessarily
Yeah.
doing committees. A little further down on the page, 353, a special meeting shall be held no sooner than 24 hours following calling the meeting. Not necessarily the mayor calling the meeting, because it says can be called by the mayor and or clerk.
Yeah, because a majority of members can summon clerk to call it.
That's right.
So if you don't mind skipping over to page 11. Take direction on this one, item 4.1.3. Currently, anybody requesting to make a delegation has to have the delegation form 10 days in advance to the office. We have it in here that it's the Wednesday prior to the meeting, which is pretty steady.
Yeah,
We okay with the 7 days? I know I am.
yeah.
Yes,
I think so, 10 seems
Oh,
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay. I have changed the schedules a little bit at the back, and I'll show you them here. You have the delegation request form, which is Schedule A. And then the directions following it. After that, I have the request to place a matter on council meeting agenda forms. That would be for councilors if you had an item to bring to the agenda.
Did you see these things starting with that?
So after that one, I have the two disclosure pecuniary interest, one for open and one for closed. And the last one is Schedule E, which is the electronic participation in council meetings. So that was a schedule that most townships adopted during the COVID time. In this procedural bylaw, it does state that electronic participation is permitted, except during closed sessions, you are not permitted, where this here says you are permitted.
Which one
The
says?
Schedule E says you are permitted, where in the bylaw, it says you are not permitted to attend closed electronically. So I'm not sure if you want to keep Schedule E or not. It's more of an emergency, everything shut down and forwards back kind of thing.
County council allows participation in closed by Zoom, but you're asked if you're alone, if everything is secure, for you to participate in closed.
it's on the honor system.
Yeah. I mean, you can run into a problem, but if someone's dishonest, they're gonna be dishonest whether they
Yeah.
are or not. Right? Right.
I would like to see it left open where somebody could, in
Yeah.
the event they wanted to attend and they couldn't get here, at least they could attend,
Yeah. I
especially in
mean,
this day and age.
yeah, I mean, there is certain times that you just can't make it to the meeting, but you could maybe,
And you could join remotely.
yeah.
No, I'd like to see that as an opportunity.
And I know, I understand that, and I don't have a problem with that,
So in
I
the
would
actual
better.
procedural bylaw, do you want that changed that you can attend closed electronic?
I would think you would put it right in the bylaw, I don't think it needs to be in a separate schedule. I would think so.
Okay, so we can remove Schedule E and then incorporate into the bylaw that you
Yes.
can
It's less paper and less
Yeah.
looking for something. You go for it, it's all in one spot.
Those are all my questions. I don't know if council had anything else I wanted to
No, it's
discuss.
good.
I just said I had looked at it the last time, and that was fine.
No, I think it's pretty good.
I like you're taking out the part about, a committee of adjustment. 5.3.7 on page 14.
Oh, I already did that, yes.
What about the next page, 5.42, you had that grade? Appointments and organization of committee boards and special purpose boards.
Because that's good.
No, you need that.
Yeah, no, I got those in.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
She's referring to 542 and 543.
yeah, because we need those
Yeah.
in. Because that tells us how we get our committees.
So is there something gone or nothing is gone?
There is on the other,
No, on this, on where it says appointment. the
no,
appointments are
that's
on,
all
okay.
there.
Right, okay. Good.
Do we want to make the appointments for the term of council, or do we want to make them yearly? This is saying that they be for the term of council.
You can look at the manual, doesn't hurt.
And I think when you look at recreation committees, you may, if your number gets down, you may have to advertise at different points during the year
Oh, sure.
for, to look for
There'd be
members.
exceptions, for sure.
Yeah,
Should have the flexibility to do that.
yeah.
Is everybody okay with the application?
Yeah.
I will have that as a schedule to the,
Yes,
to the bylaw.
and another thing with the disclosure of the community interest, that form has to be filled out explaining exactly what it's asking.
Yeah.
You can't just put to item 2.1
No.
on the agenda. It has to be explained
Yeah, why you have a conflict.
why you have a conflict
Sure,
with that.
yeah.
Because I know a lot of them weren't being filled out that way.
Oh,
So we just have to make mind of that because they are open to be looked at by the public.
Yep.
Except for the closed ones, they are.
No, they aren't.
Right.
You could just maybe add that, if the need arises to appoint additional committee members, the applications can be, I lost my train of thought.
Posted throughout the
Yeah.
year
Yeah, from time to
Yeah.
time, as needed.
as needed, yeah.
Yeah. And something to the effect that, you could, do a search for further applicants for a committee or.
Yeah, if need arises to appoint additional committee members, it may be advertised as required.
Sounds good.
If council's okay with those changes, I will make those changes. Would you like this sent off for legal review?
Can't see why not.
I don't think it hurts. It probably won't cost much to have a legal review on it.
It should be minimal. To have a review, like it'll take for an hour time or something.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on. We have a resolution that we council the corporation of the township of Blue Mountain, Dr. Ragland, go into closed session pursuant to Municipal Act section 239 sub 2 for the purpose of subsection B regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and subsection D, labor relations or employee negotiations. Could I get a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Keller, seconded by Councillor Quad. Any questions? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against? Motion is carried. Okay, we have a resolution that the council of the corporation of the township of Blue Mountain, Dr. Ragland, come out of the closed session at 8:52 p.m. Could I get a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Keller, seconded by Councillor Banks. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against? Motion carried. While we were closed, we talked about two issues, two identifiable individuals as allowed under the municipal law. We have a motion that we, the council of the corporation of the township of Blue Mountain, Dr. Ragland, hereby adopts bylaw 2023-17 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the March 6, 2023 special meeting of council. Could I get a mover for that, please? Okay, moved by Councillor Capel, seconded by Councillor Banks. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against? Motion carried. Resolution that this meeting adjourn at 8:53 p.m. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Quad. Meeting is adjourned.